Welcome back to the podcast. Yeah. Hello, everybody. My name is Pat Flynn, and it's great to have you here at Philosophy for the People. And I want to recommend to you one philosophy book that I think you need to read this year. And if you're tuning into this podcast, I think it's probably safe to assume that you enjoy reading and that you especially enjoy reading philosophy. And I've been wanting to do this episode for a couple of days now, but I was really stuck on what is the book that I'm going to recommend? What is that one book that, regardless of whatever else you read, I want you to promise me, I want you to promise Pat Flynn that you're going to read this book for me, for grandma. And I spent a lot of time thinking about this. I spent a lot of time kind of looking through my library and thinking back on my personal history, my sort of intellectual development, my spiritual journey, all of that. Thinking about, well, my gosh, there's been so many books, so many works that are classic works, of course, like the Republic, which we just did a series on, and a lot of contemporary works that have had major influence on me. So, what is the one book I'm going to recommend? I finally settled on one, and you know what? We're just going to do the big reveal right now because you probably read the description and saw what it is anyway. So, let me tell you the book, and then I want to talk about it, explain why I think you should read this book this year if you haven't already. And then I want to get your recommendations in the comments. I want you to tell me one book that has, and not just me, but tell everybody else, one book that has really made a profound impact on you. That would be your one book that you recommend everybody else read this year. Okay, so here's mine. Got it in my hand. Ready? I've recommended this book before in passing, but it is Explorations in Metaphysics, Being God Person by Father Norris Clarke. Why did I pick this book? Well, first off, it's not even, it's not technically a book. It's actually a collection of essays, of published work, sort of revised and updated, that he compiled into this really wonderful volume called Explorations in Metaphysics. And first off, Norris Clarke was somebody that had a profound impact on just my intellectual development, the way, especially as I was really beginning to investigate Thomism and the different schools of Thomism, because as we know, there's Thomism ain't just like one thing, right? A lot of different Thomists out there. But Norris Clarke was always somebody who was struck me as a tremendous truth seeker. And he has this project that he calls a sort of creative retrieval or the creative completion of Thomism. And he's really trying to be very, very honest, and he's trying to be very faithful to the thought of St. Thomas, but he's willing to do some new stuff, which is really cool. He's willing to wrestle with new problems and take what were maybe seeds in St. Thomas, but uh, not systems yet. Seeds for systems, but they were thought that wasn't fully systematized, and try and work it out, try and develop it. In many ways, he reminds me of Jacques Maritain. I think Maritain was the same way. Now, there's a risk there. There's a risk, and that is, whenever you try and do something new, you might rub some of the old school hardliners the wrong way. So, and of course, there's many critics of Norris Clarke among Thomists, just as there are of Maritain. I'm not concerned about that. I'm just concerned about what is true. Is he making good arguments? Is he doing good work? And overwhelmingly, I think yes. Do I agree with absolutely everything he says? Well, a large bit of it, actually. Yeah, I would say if there's sort of like any one thinker, uh, where I would say if you just read all of his stuff, you'll have a pretty close picture of how Pat Flynn kind of sees the world. I think it might be Norris Clarke. So what are you going to find in this book? Why should you read this book? Well, this book deals with some very classic and also some very difficult problems. So he's going to help you, uh, I think, resolve a lot of difficulties, perennial difficulties in metaphysics and epistemology and philosophy of God. So, for example, he's got an excellent essay called "A New Look at the Immutability of God," and he's trying to come up with a model to show how we can affirm a very strong form of divine simplicity and immutability, which is, of course, sort of the package deal with classical theism, with a contingent creation and God's knowledge of contingent things, and indeed human freedom, and a robust libertarian human freedom. And I think he does a really tremendous job in here, and I'm largely convinced that Norris Clarke was sort of ahead of the game on what has now become known as some of these sort of extrinsic models that we've talked about with thinkers like Dr. W. Matthews Grant, which I think really helped to solve so many of these sort of thorny issues. I think he was really ahead of the game on that. I think there's great compatibility there, and I hope someday to actually to do some research and do some writing on that very topic, to try and do a project of creative retrieval and completion with Norris Clarke himself on this topic. So I think you'll really enjoy that essay if you're kind of interested in um, the tall grass issues of philosophy of God and classical theism. But of course, he's got some other really just wonderful stuff here in terms of just understanding the Thomistic system, Thomistic metaphysics. Two essays in here are going to be really helpful. He's got an essay on analogy and the meaningfulness of language. So he does an amazing job of explaining and defending what is often called the doctrine of analogy, stretch concepts. In fact, is how he describes them. Why we really need to allow for stretch concepts, and why they are meaningful, and how it really helps us to make sense, not just of God, but some of the deepest structure of reality itself. So if you've kind of heard of Thomas talk about analogy before, I think Norris Clarke's essay in here is going to be a really helpful starting point for you, or also just helpful maybe in thinking through some of the objections and issues that are typically raised against it. He also has an excellent essay on the meaning of participation in St. Thomas. So, of course, the participation metaphysics is essential, uh, I believe, to the Thomistic system as a whole. So understanding that is really important. Um, Norris Clarke is going to help you do that in this book. But really, I think one of the most beautiful aspects of this book is his account of relationality and his development of relational realism in epistemology, and his account of being. He gives a very deep and profound account of being, where he's going to say that to be is to be substance in relation. And I'm not going to spoil anything, but those essays had a profound impact on me, and I think that there's very significant implications in that thought, very helpful implications, including that kind of twist up all the way to the philosophy of God and the Trinity. And Norris Clarke makes some beautiful connections uh, from his sort of metaphysical analysis of being to the doctrine of the Trinity that I just think are so cool. His philosophical anthropology, also amazing. So even though it's called exploration in metaphysics, he is dealing with issues in epistemology and philosophical anthropology, and all these things are of course intermeshed. So you also get a taste of his natural theology, some of his sort of well-known contemporary sort of metaphysical arguments for classical theism. He's got a few presentations of those in this book. So I just think that this is just such an important book. I think it should be read by anybody who loves and is interested in philosophy. But it especially it should be read by all people who are Thomists, or at least attracted to Thomism, or the thought of Saint Thomas Aquinas in particular. Another reason I'm recommending this book is because, and this is something I thought about as well, is I think Norris Clarke hits that sweet spot between accessibility and rigor. And this is always the sort of perennial difficulty, right? Like you want somebody to be rigorous, but you also want them to be, an enjoyable read, right? Other things equal, I want to, enjoy reading my philosophy. Sometimes that's not always the case. Sometimes you're just in the, you're just, it's just really dense. It's just really technical. I didn't want to give you a really dense, technical, highly specialized book. I wanted to give you a book that I felt was, yes, rigorous, but actually is also beautifully written. And Norris Clarke is, I I believe, a very beautiful writer. He does a great job of making difficult thought easy, which is a theme here at Philosophy for the People, of bringing down what can be really tough ideas and breaking them down in a way that I think makes them much more accessible and susceptible to understanding. So I'll say that. So there it is. That's my book that I'm recommending for you. The one book that I think you should read this year, Explorations in Metaphysics by Norris Clarke. If you want to get the bundle, it's also a generally affordable book too. So it's not like one of these $100, yeah, you should just take some of that money Santa gave you. You'll be able to afford this. But if you want to get the bundle, you might want to grab his other book, The One and the Many, as well, if you want to get onto a real Norris Clarke kick. But this is the one I picked, and I hope you read it. Now, let me leave with this. I want to hear from you. If you've read this, love to hear your thoughts. How did this book impact you? Did it impact you? In what ways? Tell me your impressions of this book if you've already read it. I would love to hear that. It seems like for many, many people, Norris Clarke is something of a spiritual experience. People kind of read Norris Clarke, his work, and just something happens, something kind of profound. Certainly that was the case for me when I first discovered him, and I've heard similar stories among other people. And I think that there's an aesthetic aspect to Norris Clarke that affects that. He just has such a beautiful way of presenting, I think, profound truths. And it's just very special. So we'd love to hear your thoughts on that. And then I would love to hear what is one book that you would recommend that everybody read this year. So please leave a comment. Let us know what the name of the book is, and let us know why you think this is a really important book and why everyone should read it. So I would love to hear from you. I would love to see those comments, and hopefully we'll get a really cool reading list down below. So please be sure to chime in. Okay, thank you so much, and bye-bye. Yeah.